We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelek Chof Zayin, volume 27. This is the second Sicha for the Parshas Tazria. We're learning it Leilu Nishmas, Rav Levi Yitzchok ben Chaim Tzvi, Tehei Nishmos Yitzrura B'Tzrer HaChaim. So with this Sicha, the Rebbe explains a tremendous uh, lesson that we get from the Parsha of Negoim, so that the actually establishing who is the one who decides if it is a nega or not. You need a sage, you need somebody smart who knows all the details of all the halachas, what is tumah not. But who is the one that actually says that he becomes tamei? It has to be through a kohen. And not only the tare, but actually the tumah is done. To start with, a kohen must decide that he's tamei. But if the kohen is relying on the chacham, why did the Torah insist? Now this is not. We don't have reasons for everything, but why would it be logical? How could we explain why the Torah wants the kohen dafke to be the one that is going to say that he's tamei? And the Rebbe explains that the kohen who is an oyev Yisrael, he's going to make sure by the Chacham, he's going to check and double check to make sure that it's actually right. So that is actually going to make sure that we'll know that he's actually Tomei. That's how much the Eibishter wants to protect it. This is a tremendous lesson, how we need to approach another Yid, as the Rebbe will learn in the Hayrah. And let's go step by step. Aleph. Tazria base Aleph. Benegeya tumas negoyim seine faran zwei klolus dike dinim. With regards to the tuma for negoyim, for a nega, these plagues, there are two general halachas. Halachas. One is to determine if he's tummy or not, and one is to who makes him tummy. Aleph diriyas hanega. That is to see the nega. If CS is a negatome or not, in order to determine, to set whether this is a tomidika nega that is makes the person impure or not, and that must sein durch a that needs to be through a sage. Was Yoirenu Rabbi? How does the sage come to know this so specifically? Yoirenu Rabbi. The Rebbe quotes here from the Lashon of the Rambam, whose teacher will instruct him, boki b'chol hanigoyim, and he will be an expert in all of the plagues, ubishmeisehim, and in their names, knowing the exact names, what is what, benige odom kulam, in all negoyim of a person, that is on the flesh of the person, ubenige begodim, and the negoyim that affect the garments, ubenige bottom, and the negoyim that affect the homes. So that has to have a chacham that was taught by his teacher about all these details. Und der chacham, that sage, muss nicht sein dafke a kohen. He doesn't have to be specifically a kohen. Nor hakil kshedim liris es anagoyim, as we say, the Rambam, that everybody is fit to see the negoyim. You don't have to have a kohen. Base. So that's one thing, is determining, seeing the nega. Base. Hatuma v'hatahara tluya b'kohen. But to make tomei and to make clean, that depends on the kohen. Afilu nochdem vider chacham had bashtimt as is a nega tomei. Even after the sage determined that this is a impure nega, ver der menuga nit tomei, the one who is plagued does not become tomei, bis a kohen zok tomei, until the kohen says, you are tomei. And similar is also when he gets clean. As afila when der mensch, or der beged, even when the person or the garment wird ausgeheilt von dem nega, is healed from this plague, bleibt betumose, he still remains in his tuma, Ad sheyomer loy kohen tohir ato, until the kohen says to him, "You are clean." So we see one thing is to determine when is it a nega, is it tome or not? That's a chacham, but that's not sufficient to make him tome. Even if the chacham determines, we need a kohen to actually tell him tome, and we need a kohen to actually tell him tohim. Und das, was die Amide von der Kohen is at Naili Kuva, this that we're saying that the Kohen needs, this is a condition that, hold back, he would not become Tomei, and he would not become Tohir. You need a Kohen to schaffen the Chaloisa Tuma V'Hatara. That creates the uh, resting of Tuma and Tara. How does the person become Tomei and Tohir? Is through the Kohen. Is be'oifen, that would even be in a case as a kohen she'enu yedei liris. Let's say a kohen is not able to see, and still unafila hoyo kotne shoyte, he can visibly not see, or even if he was a kohen or a minor or a shoyte, is er soimech al divrei hachochem, he can rely on the words of the sage, which means the Kohen himself has no, even when he has no idea about the nega, he relies on the words of the Chacham. HaChacham re'ehu v'omer loi. The Chacham sees him and he tells him, Emer Tomei, say Tomei. V'akoyin omer Tomei, Emer Toyer chulu. The Kohen says, Tomei Toyer. Basically, he's like a robot, basically the Kohen, just saying what he was told, but he has no input. So what's the point? Why do we need this kohen here? So we need to have an explanation. Aleph. The bald as their kohen is saivizich soymechal divrei chochem. The kohen anyways relies on the words of the chochem because he knows, because the chochem tells him. Was is negei amiras hakohen dafke? Why do we need the kohen to say specifically? That's number one. Beis. Was is that inyan miyuchad in Tumas Tzaras? What is so special about the Tumah of Tzaras? By this particular Tumah, there's a lot of difference of Tumah, but only by Tumas Tzaras was dafke by der Tumah. It's specifically by this impurity of Tzaras. Zokton Torah Zachidish, Torah instructs such a novelty, a novel idea, to have a kohen dafke say it. As hatuma v'hataret liya b'kohen, that the tuma and the tara hinges on the kohen. The kohen needs to say tamei or toyer. Why is it specifically by the negatzaras? Now, it's a decree. That's what the Eibishter says, but the Rambam says we have to look if we can find rationalization. That's what we should do. Afal pi ados is an inyan, even though this is a matter which is a decree by the Pasuk, that's the way the Eibishter wants you to do. Is over you do of us the Rambam zogt, it's known that which the Rambam says, as afila by chuke haTorah. Even when we're dealing with the statutes of the Torah that have no reasoning, was say the same. They're decrees. They're not rationalization. Still, Israel is boinin bahem. It's proper, it's fitting to reflect in them. Anything that you're able to give a reason, give them a reason. It's taka chuk, it's taka gezerah, but if you can find rationalization reasons, give. Ubefrat atam was is verbunden mit tikkun adayis, especially if you're looking for a reason. The reason is helping to correct the person's attitudes, the person's attributes, the way conducting his minds to the proper way. So if we have a good reason for that, then we should use that reason. Try to find. Kilushaina Rambam, as the Rambam uses the language, used to use the language of the Rambam, as Reiv Dine HaTorah Einon Elo Eitz, that most laws of the Torah are mostly advice, Lesakin Hadeyes Uleyashir Kol HaMaisim, to fix that the people's ideas should be correct, proper, and to straighten out the action that we should do the right things. Other, that's Lashon Ram, other B'Lshein HaKosuv, or to use the language of the Pasuk, Vayetzaveinu Hashem. Hashem told us, it's called Achukim Ha'ela, all these statutes, Leyiras Hashem, to fear Hashem. So if we take a statue, we explain it, and it brings to the fear of Hashem. So when we have a reason, which will be a lesson in the matter of Yerushalayim, and the Rebbe will learn with his explanation that there is a tremendous lesson for Yerushalayim in the way we have to treat another Yid, that the Rebbe will learn from this halacha of the kohen, for the statue of the kohen, the Gzeres HaKosuf, that you need a kohen to say the Tumah V'Tara, although he relies entirely on the Chochem, and also why specifically did the Torah give this chidush tafke by Mitzorah, as the Rebbe will explain. But the Rebbe wants to first explain, Mele, if we even said that the chiddush is that the kohen has to say tohir, so then you would say, since a tohir is a quality of a kohen, he's makes, but the most gzeres hakos you need a kohen is not to make him clean, because that's already follows. The first thing is to become tomei. So why does tuma depend on a kohen? Mainly, if you want to say tahara, which is the cleaning, okay, that would be a little bit understood. But why would we need the kohen to say the tuma? Base. Let's look on the side. The Rikir Chiddush HaTorah as Hatuma v'Hatara Tluya B'Kohen. The main novelty that the Torah says that both the Tumah and the Tara are hinged on the Kohen. Direkt sich ois bepashtus. Simply, this expresses itself not in Taras HaMetzorah, not how the Metzorah becomes clean, nor bikir in them was but mainly that this is the chiddush that he is also the one that has to make him tummy. Warum the metzias von Taras HaMetzorah? When could we make the Metzorah clean? When do we need the kohen to make it clean? Can kommen erst nachdem es ist früher gewesen Tumas HaMetzorah. That can only come if there is previously the Tumah of the Metzorah. Is the Rebbe mistaber zu sagen? So therefore, it makes sense. After the kohen makes him tamei, he has to make him clean. So that would follow. Why does the kohen have to make him clean? Because he made him tamei. But the issue is, why do we need a kohen to make him tamei? Is the Rebbe mistaber zu sagen? If he made him tamei, it makes sense to say ados was tares tzaras is tluya b'kohen. Why is the purity of the tzaras hinged on the kohen? Is a mesuv of their phone, so that's a result from the fact was tumas mitzorah. Since the tumah of the mitzorah hinges on the kohen, so he has to make him clean as well. Thus haste. That means like this: About the tumah shaft sich nor durch hamiras kohen. Since the tumah is created only by the kohen saying the riber darf euch the tare for the tumah. Therefore, also the purity of this tumah aufgetan werden darf durch der hamiras shel kohen, specifically through the saying of the kohen. So why the kohen would need to be metayer after we said that he has to be metame wouldn't be a chiddush. Main chiddush is that he has to be metame. So the chiddush wird noch schwerer zu verstehen, so it becomes even more difficult to understand. Wie schleimer if der chiddush hat teure wohl gewinn bescheiches zu tarosei. It would be okay if the main novelty of the Torah was how it relates to how he becomes pure. But man verstanden, then we would understand Favotos is abhängig in a kohen, why it hinges on, it's dependent on to the kohen. Hayois as inyan hakahuna is verbunden mit matzev funtara. Since a kohen needs to be in a situation of tara, with the din is the din as a kohen torzich neshvetama zayin. A kohen is not allowed to defile himself. So a kohen is associated with tahara. Therefore, seine Kahanim, die welche seine Mashpia Tarat sind. That's why Kahanim are the ones that give purity to the Yidden, they have to make them tired. That would okay be understood. Aber verwosel darf kein Kohen sein, der was poilt, as it is sein Tomei. So however, why should a Kohen be the one that impacts, that affects that a Yid should become Tomei? So the Rebbe is articulating over here, it's not only why do we need a Kohen in the middle when the Chacham is the one that's doing the whole thing, and why only by Mitzvah, but the Rebbe says we also need the Kohen mainly to say Tomei. Why would the Kohen be the one that impacts Tumah? Mele, if he would only have to impact Tada, we understand. But it's mainly the Tumah because the reason need him to be hated Tada because he made him Tumah. Why does the Torah want the Kohen to be Mamshech the Tumah there? Gimel. So the Rebbe will explain that the Kohen, because he's a Erev Yisrael, he benches Be'ava, so the Kohen will make sure that the Chacham ruled was correctly. Gimel. V'yashleimar can say Einam Fundi Bi'urim, that one of the explanations is Tumas Mitzvah is a very serious, the most serious of the Tumas. By Tumas Mitzvah gefindt man achumra. We find the stringency by Tumas Mitzvah was is nito by andere Tumas. Does not exist by other Tumas. Over there we say Bodod Yeshim Chutz Lamachana Meshova. He should sit all by himself. Outside of the camp he sits, and outside the camp he can't sit with the other Tumeim. He has to be by himself. First, he is sent outside of all three camps of the Yidden around the Unindam Gufa, and within the camp, Bodot Yeshiv. He sits all by himself. The other people that are Tomei cannot sit with him. So that means, as the Ort von Amatzoide is afilu mechutz lamachane von andere Tmeim. The place where a Metzoide is even outside of the camp, where other people that are Tomei are sitting, but they can't mix with the Metzodoim, with those who have leprosy, because they need to be on their own. That means that they're in a category of their own, even amongst the Tmei. Und das ist euch der Teucheruchni von Tumas Sarah. This is also the meaning, the spiritual content of Tumas Sarahs. Atuma chamura kol kach, that it's a very stringent, such a stringent Tumah, through welche der Odom hatomei, through which the person who is Tomei is in ganzen Oyser the Machane the Gedusha, he's entirely outside of the holy camp. It means that on a spiritual level, he is totally outside. He's not belong. He's not part of the community. He's outside of the community of Kedusha. He's not in the camp of Kedusha. He's as if to say that he is locked out from his connection to the Jewish people who are our holy nation. We lock him out. And if them zok Torah, and here the Torah says, who can rule about another Jew? As if to say that he's locked out, God forbid, from Machne de Gedusha, from the camp of Kedusha. Over here, it can only be a kohen. The other tumas, you're not locking him out as you do by the tumas mitzvah. Here we need a kohen. Why a kohen? A kohen is in Yoni Levorech Esam Yisrael Ba'ava. A kohen, he blesses the Yidden with love. That's what the bracha is. Berichas Kohanim. A kohen is the Isha Chesed. A kohen is the kind person, was benched Yidden Ba'ava. He blesses Yidden, and he is the one that does it with love. He blesses with love. Ki Yedua, as it's known as Dosis Atanai Ikri in Birchos Kohanim, that this is a main condition that he must, when the Kohanim bless, as a Muzayin Be'ava, it must be with love. Und ob das Feld chas v'sholem beim Kohen HaMavorech. If the Kohen that is blessing is missing that love, and he's not really loving the people that he's blessing, that may affect him negatively, is as farim asakona. That's a danger for the Kohen. If the Kohen doesn't really do it ba'ava, he's in danger. Und Take Mahai Time was der Kohen is Isha Chesed. And Take for that reason, because the Kohen is a man of kindness, Farlos sich Teure Norif im. Torah only relies on him. So I raise given if I eat azap sak to give out for a Jew such a ruling to keep him outside of the camp. That's a tremendous uh, responsibility to tell to a yid that he has to be outside of the camp. Who can do that? It's only a koinish chesed. And the Rebbe says this fits in very well with the pasuk. Well, pizeh yuvon der hemshech hakosuf. We understand the flow of the pasuk in Shoftim. It says hakoyhanim bom bochar Hashem elikim lisharsei. He chose them to serve him. Ulevarich b'shem Hashem, and to bless the Yidden in the name of Hashem. And the pasuk continues, "V'apiyim yiyah kol riv v'chol nega." Every nega is by their mouth, is by the mouth of the kohen. So, what's the connection? Because Hashem chose them to bless with the nega. You see very clearly, Davke mitzadem was bom bochar Hashem levorich b'shem Hashem, because Hashem chose them to bless in the name of Hashem, levorich der far v'alpim yikol nega. That's why they determined the nega. Avade and avade moves der psak from koyin zayin miyusad loizer. For sure, of course, the ruling of the koyin, it has to be based only on Torah. He can't make up his own rule. Was der far is the choylerosh muz zayin der iyas hanega dur chachocham b'chochmas haTorah. First, the nega needs to be seen by a chocham, a sage, who has the wisdom of Torah. Baki b'chol negoim knows, expert in all the different places. In addition to that, not only does he know, he received it from his teacher. So you need the Torah's determination over here. But when es kommt aber zum Herabtragen dem Psak din bepoil. But when it comes to the bringing down the actual ruling in practical, to make the person Tomei, muss das sein durch dem Kohen Isha Chesed. That must be through the Kohen who is a man of kindness. Warum davke feelt dem fulum chaimer? Because it's only he that feels the full seriousness, the full stringency, the responsibility for the Reisgeb Mazab Sakdin to give such a ruling of Allah of a zweiten Yid and another Yid to tell him that he doesn't belong in the camp. Und der Fahr wird nicht sporn ken because he's an Isha Chesed, he will not spare any effort. Gut choike v'doyre sein beim Chochem. He's going to very well investigate and question by the Chochem b'negedem sagdin ha-Torah, and about the rule of the Torah that he just ruled, and he's going to encourage and remind them that the Beis Din needs to judge, but they need to save, they need to be favorably to try to make sure that this is really what is the halacha. So, and that makes that extra level of knowing that it's practical and this is how it's affecting impacts the right halacha is similar to the idea that we have al derech hayedu in dem inyan fun ein chacham kibal hanisoyin. We say person is wise is only if he was tested. There's no wise as tested. So that means as b'shas men lernt an inyan wissendik, that when you learn a matter and you know as fun der shakle vitari vetariskum an ariro psak din lemaisa, that from this debate there will be a lesson and an actual ruling lemaisa, is men sich in der maimik mitayigi seder. Then you put more deeply, more effort. Bis men der Grund wird sich zum amiti so yinyonim hoinyan, until you reach and you come to the true matter, because you know that this is something which is nisoyan, which is practical. And here the kohen sees what's he has to do it. He's going to make sure that it's right. Und as noch sein Yegire v'chakire udrisha, and if after his effort and his investigation and his searching, is der kohen isha chesed machlit, and the kohen the isha chesed decides uzok tome, that is dan isman zicher, then you are sure as das is der psak din amiti from Torah, that is the true ruling of the Torah. Uli idach is man batuach, and on the other hand, you're also sure as the kohen metzcharanling in them b'chol yicholte, the kohen will invest himself with all of his ability, as the noch zol zayin taras ha-metzora, that later on the metzora to be cleaned. He makes him tamei, and that will later on will give him the push that he should make sure that the metzora becomes clean. Dalit. Darfun is the hero brura. What do we have? A very clear lesson. When you see something not good, God forbid, by another Jew, you see something bad by someone else. Biz as that's by it appears to you, ayen as yener is in azashval hamatzav, that the other one is in such a low condition, he's in such a low level. Biz as hoitzias atzme min haklal, he has taken himself out from the community. And is chaz v'sholem nidroyu zu zayin b'toich machne Yisrael. God forbid he is not fit to be in the Jewish camp. That's how you look at him, and you look at him from your perspective. Zok Torah, Torah says, Afila chochem god luboki b'chol Torah kula. Even a great sage and one who is expert in the whole entire Torah. Unleit zayin shikul adal in chochem sa Torah, and according to his estimation, his mind, in the wisdom of Torah is yener roy zum sak. The other one is fit, the ruling from mechutz lamachan hameshova. He belongs, his set places outside of the camp. Is eider gita ruis azap sak of atzveiten yidden. Before you met out such a ruling about another Jew, darf man sich frier gut beugen sein. Then you must check yourself out very well. Wo mehaut in der Mitte, where are you standing in the measure from Chesed and Ahavas Yisrael, of kindness and loving another Yid? Und oi, was es fällt chas v'sholem in Ahavas Yisrael amitis, and if God forbid, if you're missing true love of another Yid, hat nit gerecht, you have no right to such a ruling about Tzveiten Yidden, another Yid that he belongs outside of the camp. If you can't have the midas hachesed, just like the kohen needs to be there to give the ruling, you have to have that midah of chesed and avos Yisrael. Es ken sein, why? Because it could be, as I'm psak stammt nit von reinem shikul hadas Torah. Maybe it's not pure estimation of Torah, your mind exactly, nor for midas built over. Maybe your own refined own character traits, and therefore that's why you're giving out that ruling. So you must check first on your midas hachesed. That's the lesson. Torah zogt, Torah says, as the nega alein shaft nidit tuma. Torah says that the plague itself does not create tuma, nor the psak b'amidas hakoyen. It's the ruling and the koyen, the isha chesed. When the koyen, the isha chesed tome, that creates the tuma. Poiled as their mitzvah zol zayin tome. That accomplishes, that impacts that the mitzvah becomes tome. Kumt ois. So it turns out, what happens as dervus is nit kain koyen isha chesed, if you're not a kohen isha chesed, paskent auf a zweiten Yid mechutz lamachna meshove, and you rule about a second Yid that he has to be outside of the camp, zokter sheker, you're saying a lie, because he's not a kohen, he's not a chesed saying it. It has to be a kohen isha chesed saying it. If it's not a kohen isha chesed, then who say he's not tummy? So you're saying a lie. B'meili is not mitzvah. Then he is the mitzvah. Well, mitzvah means moitzi shem ra. The Mitzvah means you're giving out a bad name by saying it on the other person. So is Tia Teres HaMitzvah. Say, just say, what is Mitzvah? So is Tia Teres Shamra. This is the Torah. That's why there's the plague in the first place, is because it's a Mitzvah. Not only are you speaking Lashon Hara, you're lying because you can't really say that about another Yid, but there is Moitzi Shemra. Lashon Hara means you're saying bad, but even it's true. But not only are you saying Lashon Hara on a Sveiten Yidden, which means you're saying bad, was Lashon Hara is Afa Pishever Emes. Lashon Hara is even when you say true, was Oich of them is that eine Shune going to das also for Lashon Hara. But here we're talking about you're saying false, you're Moitzi Shem Ra. But is Moitzi Shem Ra, but you are taking a bad name. Omer Sheker al Chaveda, you're saying a falsehood about your friend. If you don't have the ches, you don't have the right to know, and he's not really guilty of what you're making him, that mechutz machen dem l'shav. Umayta kante. So what is the fix for the person who's not a chesed and he just gives out rulings without being Yisha Chesed? And he's a Meitzi Shemra, Lashon Hara, Meitzi Shemra. So what's his, how do we fix him? Because we're saying that he's like a Metzora, he's a Meitzi Shemra. So he has to be alone, Biswannet sich nicht eingewöhnen zu gucken auf zweiten Jeden bei until he will not train and get used to himself to look on another Yid with a good eye. Darf sich mavdil sein von anderen Yidden. He must separate himself from other Yidden. Und nicht stören sie, and not to disturb them mit seinen Lashon Hara, so Shemra, with his words of Lashon Hara and making a bad name. Davker, wenn wird sich äußern von dem Nega, when he's going to heal himself from this plague of having to say bad things about other people, is Vishaver Rafalai, then he's going to return, he's going to be healed. Durch an Hoge, von Avas Yisrael Amitis, and through a conduct of true love of another Yid, in an Eifem von Avas Chinam, in the way of senseless love, love in vain for no reason, is thus mevatel, that negates, takes away sinas chinam, the senseless hatred, which is hagolus. The golus, the reason for golus is sinas chinam. Shenikra hatzarua, which is called the tzarua. It's part of tzaras. Kumde derech melo miyad. So immediately, automatically, we get the geula hamitis v'ashlema, the true and complete redemption of the Mashiach Tzidkenu through our righteous Mashiach, or b'meheru v'yameinu mamish, and very speedily in our days. This is Mesichas Shabbos Parshas Toldos Tovshin Mem Hey.